Right, we're going to talk about archiving and media management, moving on from what we just did with AXO. Martin and Keith, Global Distribution and Yoyota, we finished a production and we've done all our editing and you don't leave that media on drives. What are your options?
Well, you can, for speed of workflow, and really the industry is all about workflow and how you can make it faster. And Atomos do this with giving you a drive ready to edit, ProRes or Avid DNX HD or HR now. But what do you do with that source media? In the old days, you would have tape at the front end, and that would be your archive. So what we're saying, and where Martin helps here, is you take your source media, you would write it off to multiple drives, spinning drives, SSD for speed. But then you would also at the same time archive onto tape, and it's data tape, it's LTO, 2.5 terabytes. Cost of a tape, maybe 25, 30 pounds. But the key is at 30-year-old archive. So where you had your tape at the front end, this is now your data tape at the back end. It's fast, so if you're writing to SSDs, spinning disk, you're getting around 160 megaseconds. So if you've got a single 7200 RPM drive, it's probably going to max out at a read of 70 to 100 meg a second. Writing to LTO, this is LTO 6, 166 megabytes per second. So it's not slowing your workflow down, and this is the key, because the thing you want to do is make it faster, but now you need your long-term preservation archive.
That's interesting, because I have an LTO 5 system in the studio in the office, and it's kind of slow. So obviously from 5 to 6, we've seen quite a step up in data write speeds.
So one of the big issues is connectivity, and a lot of people in IT with LTO would have it stuck in a server somewhere, so they're moving it over 100 meg Ethernet or gig Ethernet. There's an overhead with that, and it makes it a little slower.
You'd have a bottleneck, potentially?
You would have a bottleneck. So the M-Tape, which is a product we distribute, it's got Thunderbolt I/O. So you've got a Thunderbolt interface, which is not restricting you on bottlenecks. You can daisy chain, and therefore it does make it very, very fast.
Thunderbolt coming in here, and power, so very simple to connect up.
And then you've also got another connector.
This is a loop out. So SAS comes out and can go into a second unit. Right. Quite often, well, always you really want to make a master and a safety tape. If you've got 2 drives, you can do that in parallel, so half the time. Right. You've only got 1 drive, you put a tape in, make an archive, and then repeat the process. So a lot of our customers will use dual drives. And this way you've got Thunderbolt coming from a Mac Mini or a laptop, any computer, into here, then we loop out into the second unit and create both the tapes in parallel.
So now for anyone who's not familiar with archiving, there's the hardware, but of course there's also the platform, the software to media manage that, and that's where you guys come in, isn't it?
That's right. Yoyota creates software that fundamentally is copying something from A to B, but there's a lot more to it. First of all, you can make multiple copies in parallel, not just making it on multiple tapes, but also a copy on a RAID or a shuttle drive as well. We'll store all of the metadata about the files in a database, which you can search later, and we'll create a report of everything you've done each day, and importantly, we'll create a checksum, which is a way of verifying that the material on the camera card is the same as is on here, and also on any hard drives that you've made. So that means you're confident that you can delete the Atomos card or the camera card and put it back. They're quite expensive.
Yeah,
you can't keep them. It's not like SDHC cards where you can potentially keep them, or in the old days you keep the videotape from the camera. But now you're reusing these cards, putting them back in the camera, so all your material will be lost if you haven't backed it up.
You mentioned something very key there about trust, trusting the backup. It's that verification process, because it's all about trust, isn't it? Someone's going to wipe their original media. They need to know that the archive is safe. So what are how does this software, is this a cloud-based software? Is this something you install on a local machine? How does this work?
Yeah, it's low-cost software to encourage wide-scale adoption, easy to install, and you can make multiple copies. We're not allied to LTO, it just happens to be an extremely good way of making high-speed backups. Our customers are shooting, it was SD, then it was HD, now it's 4K, but along with 4K, you've got a greater frame size, but you've also got higher frame rates at the same time. So our wildlife customers will shoot at 60, 120, 240 frames per second. All the cameras have also got higher dynamic range. And that means more bits as well. So all of that together adds up to more and more data. There's no disadvantage to RAW files. They're quick to process, and a lot of online editing systems, grading systems work directly with them, but there is one downside, the file size. You can no longer keep all of your rushes online on a RAID or a SAN or a NAS. So you need to put them on things like LTO tape.
And I think it's, as Martin said, it's a lot of people have archiving systems, and we do some very big ones. But it's making it easy for the masses. So the whole concept of this product was to make it inexpensive, easy archiving, so that people don't lose their source media, as you said, because if you keep it on drive or you've got it on media cartridges, some of the media cartridges are very expensive. Data tape's incredibly inexpensive. And just making it cost effective means that people will do archiving and preservation instead of not.
Well, this is a very good point, Keith. I think a lot of people are burying their heads in the sand. I know, because I was doing it.
Yeah.
A lot of colleagues I work with who are doing, in the sort of 300,000 to 500,000 a year turnover production businesses are still archiving onto tapes or onto drives and sticking them on a shelf. I think there's a huge naivety, actually, in the industry of it won't happen to me. Is this something you come across?
It is. I mean, at the show, and for many years, I mean, we started pitching LTO back in 2007, and everyone said we were silly, just buy drives. Well, good luck with that, because in 5, 7, 10 years, you're going to have issues. So,
but part of the issues at that time were you were tarring information, which basically means you were bundling up all of your files together and putting them in a big blob. So it's great for disaster recovery. If you had all your material online, you had a copy on here, and you wouldn't actually access this. You wouldn't need to, because everything would still be online. And what's happened since is, as we mentioned earlier, the file sizes have got larger, so you can't keep it online anymore. But what's happened in 2011, 2012, IBM developed LTFS. So LTO is the physical tape, and LTFS is the format of the tape. And it allows you to have a file system and to mount this tape onto the desktop on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So you're confident that you're making an archive. You're not locked into our software, you're not locked into any software, you're not locked into any platform. There are multiple manufacturers making the drives, multiple manufacturers making the tapes, and the LTFS format makes it a lot more interactive. So rather than being a final archive, you can actually archive at the beginning and then keep dipping back into that, bringing back elements as you need them, and rather than filling up, rather than having to increase the size of your online storage. Because so that's really the change.
Yeah. And by the time you've bought your 24th 2 terabyte hard drive, you've essentially paid for the technology. A lot of people coming past here would say they've got 50, 100, 300, 500 drives sitting on shelves, in boxes, in cupboards. And if they're not spun up, they're not self-healing, and therefore your data is now degrading. And even SSDs, if you have a data bit high, go data bit low, well, now you have data corruption. So, if you have more than 24 drives, this has paid for itself. And for education, it would be wonderful if you spend 3 years of your life running up huge debts to find that in 3 years' time, some of your earlier work is non-existent.
Yeah.
So again, colleges can invest in the hardware, and students for, a small bar bill can buy an LTO to protect their
You mentioned,
data.
having 24 hard drives, but it sounds like a lot. But I did this recently. I cleared out some cupboards and realized I had 20, 30 hard drives. And what happens is you buy a hard drive, it can be 1 or 2 at a time, 200 or 300 pounds at a time, 500 pounds at a time, 100 pounds at a time, and you don't notice. You keep sort of plugging the hole by buying another drive, buying another drive,
It's the bandage approach, just keep
and then
it.
you keep moving files around going, I can't remember if I've got them, so you end up duplicating files on different drives. And you're right, actually looking at it strategically and saying, let's look at an LTFS system up front. And I know when I invested in my Atto and my Quantum tape drive, it was probably about £2,000 worth of investment. But now the tapes are so cheap, and I literally sleep better at night, knowing that if the office burnt down, the main media is stored on Dropbox in the cloud where possible, and also on LTO tape. And it's just a peace of mind thing.
I mean, you can drag and drop, so you don't need software, you don't need to buy any additional software. However, it's a good idea because, as Martin was saying, you can track stuff, you know where things are, and there are some issues with illegal characters. You can't just grab your operating system and drag it over. And if you do some funky naming on your timeline, then those files will try and get written to tape, and it may give you an error. And if your DPX files and your 50,000 files in, then you've got a problem. So again, using software that manages all that makes more sense. But the format, the file system is LTFS, so it doesn't matter Windows, Mac, Linux, you can read your data.
But to touch on checksum, I mean, it's not the backup that really counts, it's the recover, isn't it?
Yes.
And so you can drag and drop easy. The restore is everything. And I guess that's what your software does. It helps manage all of that.
So you can manually search the database. So you can search by resolution, part of the file name, the codec, the date that you think you shot it. So rather than, you'd rarely restore an entire tape. You'd be restoring pieces. So we can quickly help locate what tapes you've got to pull off the shelf, or maybe they're stored remotely, get them biked over to you, and then either manually load them in, or we also support tape libraries. And they're becoming less costly as well. You can have 8 to 80 slots, or even more, in the box, and it will automatically pull the tape in and load it into a drive, and you can restore things. Also in our software, we can drop in conforms, so the edit information from Avid, or Final Cut, or Premiere, and that gives you like a shopping list of tapes you've got to locate. When you've found the tapes, you don't need to recall back 1,000 shots, you only need to recall back maybe 70 or 80 shots that you're working on. So it will quickly sort that into order and recall just those files back for you. And
it's, again, back to that workflow. It's got to be fast, because time is money, and the more you can get done, the cheaper your production is. So being able to say, I need this file, this file, this file, getting it back instantaneously, 160 megabytes a second, still faster than a hard drive.
Now, here's another question, because there are people like me who have gone into LTO and very grateful for it. But then there's a kind of point at which, when do you stop? Because you've got an LTO backup, then you're suggesting plugging in a second drive to make a second backup.
Yeah.
That starts to kind of get, at what point do you feel secure? It's like we've got 2 physical backups in 2 separate locations.
Well, a good example would be one of our wildlife customers, Silverback Films, based in Bristol. It's a lot of ex-BBC wildlife companies. They're the same company that did Planet Earth and Frozen Planet. But when they were doing those things, they were shooting on P2, HD and things like that. So the file sizes were smaller, and they're able to keep things on hard drives and so on. But now they're shooting 4K, 2 F-65s, 1 F-55 in each location, with aerial footage, underwater footage, and they're working on multiple projects over 1, 2, 3 years. The current one, Monkey Kingdom, is coming out this year, Disney film. Now it's a 75-minute movie. They have over 1 petabyte of data duplicated on master and safety tapes. So it's about 1,200 LTO5, the previous generation tapes. And out in Sri Lanka or India, they archive to those 2 tapes, and that's it. They don't have any other, so they trust it. So that gives you the confidence. There's a very, very small chance of a verified tape producing an error on restore, and by having 2 tapes, you obviously reduce that error to, infinitesimally
And it is
small.
inexpensive because, the tape's not as if it's 150, 200 pounds. It's, it's
the LTO5 tapes they use have come down to £15 each for 1.5 terabytes. That's
So a company of my size, for example, where we've got, all our nearline storage is all, Promise RAID or GTEC, and then we write to the LTO. I mean, we're not doing double backups to LTO, but I guess it's better, having one backup to LTO is better than no backup to LTO.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And being able, with various softwares where you can write them simultaneously, and with the M-tape you can go in Thunderbolt but expand via SAS.
Yeah.
It then inexpensively, again on set, allows you to have done your double safety for LTO.
And would this be a case of buying 2 of these, or is there just a more naked drive?
Yeah, there's a more naked drive. So the Thunderbolt part's quite expensive.
Yeah. Which gives you the speed.
Exactly. So once you've gone into your Thunderbolt M tape, you then break out via SAS, and then you can run multiple SAS drives. So then it's really how fast is your source. So with Martin's software, it does some clever caching, so you can still write incredibly fast. But it is a case of if you're reading off a USB 2 drive, then it's only going to be as fast as you can read your source. But writing through the Thunderbolt and SAS, essentially you could max out 4 drives simultaneously.
So Martin, I mean, I've been using BrewP to do my media management, because the guy who recommended me use that. Presumably this software does a lot of what that does. I could swap to this without any trouble?
That's right, yeah. The tapes, LTFS tapes would be compatible. Some systems used an older system, tarring, which I mentioned earlier. At NAB, our next version of the software, which will be a free update, will include tar reading, so we'll be able to migrate tapes. But that's always something you're going to need to think about. This tape will last 30 years, but before then you'll probably have wanted to take the material on it and put it onto another form of storage. And it may well be LTO7 or LTO8, or it could be something else. Yeah. And you'll probably be able to put 4 of these onto one of the next one, or 8 of these onto one of the next one. So it is a case of migrating the data, and we're able to take it from other products, no problem, and create a new archive. One of the things we can do, you were talking about lots of USB drives or file drives you've got in the cupboard. We can hook them up to our system when you've got a quiet moment, which you probably don't ever have, but hook them up to your computer, and we'll index them only. We won't copy them anywhere. We'll just index them, add them to the database, so you can put them back in the cupboard, and we'll produce a report for each file type. You've got an hour of DV, 20 minutes of GoPro, and 40 minutes of RAW from a Red camera or whatever. So you can then search through that, and it helps you locate the material, and then you could decide to archive it to tape, or move it online, or send it to someone else. It allows you to get organized, really.
Yeah, I guess it also allows you to not start duplicating again, because all the stuff
what you were saying
kicking
earlier,
around
having the same,
it's consolidating, writing off, that's your archive. And as Martin touched on a point, that because you can use LTO, and we do Spectralogic, and they have units that go 950, to 10,000 slots and above. If you're on location, you can be, as Martin said with his customers, you can be archiving in the field, FedExing these tapes back, and they can then load them into a 10,000 tape system, which, as you migrate to LTO7, LTO8, it's consolidating all of those down while the drives aren't doing anything. So potentially overnight, it's consolidating the next rev from 5 or 6 years ago. It's consolidating those down now to, a quarter of the tapes, or a tenth of the tape.
I mean, I'm using LTO5 system. Will this read my LTO5 drive?
So this will read and writes back 1 generation, and it reads back 2.
Right, fantastic.
So even if you had LTO4, you could read it, but you can't write to it.
So what kind of costs are we looking at to use the Yoyota software?
Our licenses start at £160.
Wow.
So that's where you're working with camera cards on set to a RAID or a shuttle drive, or you're importing material in a facility from client drives, from shuttle drives, or archiving from one SAN volume to a NAS or something like that. For £360, you then have support for 2 LTO drives, and then for £560 you can support a library which could have up to 80 tapes and 4 drives. So it's
priced so you can scale it as you grow.
And they're permanent licenses with free updates. We've got a lot of things in the pipeline as well.
Yeah.
So we're not tied to LTFS and LTO, but it just is a good combination. And these tapes are actually starting to become an interchange format between different companies. So HBO, Discovery will take the programs on the tape.
Yep.
And as I mentioned, you've not just got your video and your audio and your edit project files, you've also got production data like PDFs, spreadsheets, and so on. Word documents can all be stored on a single tape.
And that could be the project, so everything to do with the project archived off.
And you know you're going to be able to read it. Whereas when you created a hard drive, they may get it and they say, oh, it's Linux format or Mac format, or it doesn't mount on my Windows, or vice versa. This is, you say it's LTFS, and they're guaranteed to be able to read it if they have an LTFS, LTO drive and some LTFS software.
So Keith, tell us a bit more about what you guys do at Global Distribution. I mean, you very much focus on storage solutions, and tell us the kind of brand
so
you
it's
represent.
really, we try and cover the entire workflow. So we work with Atomos for acquisition. They're creating ProRes and Avid DNX, so you can straight into lens to timeline 30 seconds. So once you've got your data, then what you need to do, you need to put it off onto a SAN. So you had Tiger on yesterday. Again, if you're working with Avid, it just looks like Avid, it just works. So if you're using Premiere, Avid Final Cut, all great. So then on the archiving side, on the entry level, we have M-Tape. We do all the ATO for connectivity. We do the Corning optical cables. So this is a 10-meter Thunderbolt cable, goes to 60 meters. And then there's a new USB 3 optical cable, which is great for tethering, very rugged. And then we do large archiving systems. So it's whether you're a small end user just working with GTEC drives, an M-Tape, or whether you need 10,000 LTO, you need S3, integration, asset management. We really just cover everything. So our reach is from Iceland to the Middle East, the Nordics, down to South Africa. We have a reseller network which work very closely with their users to make sure that they're buying the right kit, because budgets are tight. Buy the right stuff, buy reliable stuff, and it'll keep you going for many, many years.
Well, I mean, I think, based on my own experience, making the jump at the right time and putting investment into infrastructure is actually a really good efficiency move, because I find myself just to keep buying drives at 500, 800, a promised rate for a couple of thousand, and you keep buying them every year, and they're just adding more and more bits, rather than looking at a kind of consolidated system designed to be scalable.
I mean, like people keep buying, because we do Promise, we do GTEC. GTEC were bought by HCST. HCST are the best drives in the world. But they're mechanical. Everything will fail at some stage. So being able to kind of educate the end user into making the right decision is what we like doing. Yeah. And we have a great reseller network that helps us spread that message.
So, booth number at the show?
So it's H30, it's opposite the bar.
Right next to Atomos? Right next to
Atomos, if you can get on the booth.
Come and
and we're showing M-Tape, Martin's there. We have Tiger Technologies, we've got the ATO connectivities, fiber channel products, SANs, but you've even got a private cloud storage. So obviously there was an issue with Sony, so people are now looking at private cloud. So we have a new private cloud solution so that it's all in-house on your IT network and you don't have to worry about third-party companies.
Stuff. Well guys, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation, something that's really important. Coming up next, we've got AC Lighting, who have provided our studio lights here. Remember, any tweets go to @TVBay, and don't forget to drop your business card in the fishbowl at the front of the booth here, and enter to win one of 3 Blackmagic pocket cameras. So go and grab yourself a cup of tea, and come back next for AC Lighting.